So today, let's talk about hallucinating.
Oh man, yeah, this is a big subject.
It's kind of a funny subject.
Yeah, I sometimes get questions from people about what kind of hallucinations do you have, or I don't want to see anything bad. I don't want to see anything scary. I hear people say that too. Even just in a consultation where they're not even taking mushrooms. That's a big subject that people get very apprehensive about. So we just want to maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and the thing about hallucinating too is obviously, and maybe it's not obvious, but we're talking about macrodosing, because on microdosing, you're not generally hallucinating.
Yeah, if you want to know more about microdosing, there's another video about that. But basically, microdosing is taking mushrooms in such a small amount that you don't even really perceive it. So it's subperceptual. And therefore, you will not go into a psychedelic space or any kind of hallucinations if done properly, of course. Some people consider microdoses too big, and then they do go into a space, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about real big journey work, taking a substantial amount of mushrooms, anywhere from 2 grams to 5 grams to any more than that, where you might be in the psychedelic space and hallucinations are possible. So not every mushroom journey are automatically you're going to hallucinate. That is not the case. Some are more philosophical, would you say?
Yeah, I would say, well, I like hallucinating. I'm just going to say it. I like the hallucination part, because I think when we're talking about hallucinations, we're talking about even that beginning part where you're seeing colors and you're seeing fans and it seems like you're watching a light show. That's hallucination, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the point, right? Is a lot of people don't even know how to categorize hallucinations. And a lot of times when people say you're going to hallucinate, they're thinking they're going to see a stranger walk into their house, or, and it kind of comes from like how society views people that have schizophrenia, like hearing voices telling you things and seeing people potentially or whatnot. And that is possible. It's not impossible. More often, though, I see colors and shapes moving around and what you might see in typical psychedelic movies.
Yeah, and I think that when I'm trying to describe a hallucination, the closest that I ever get to describing it is it's like a dream.
Yeah.
It's like a dream with your eyes open. So do you have nightmares? Sure. Like when you're sleeping, and do the nightmares affect you psychologically? Sometimes they do. Generally, they don't last that long. And when I say generally, like typically for people who don't have any sort of disorder or trauma around whatever it was that they were experiencing in the nightmare, it doesn't, like, your experience is not prolonged after you wake up for more than a few minutes or maybe some hours.
Yeah.
But,
and describing it like a dream is close to what it can feel like, where it doesn't feel so abnormal in that space. You really feel like, oh, okay, yeah, I dream all the time, or even if I don't remember them, it still feels pretty normal to be in your dream. A lot of people don't really think, oh no, I'm in a dream, I'm hallucinating this monkey, or whatever. So it's like that, where it feels like it's just part of the experience. And sometimes there's even memory recall, where you could go into the past, where it can be difficult for people that do have trauma. This is the place, though, where healing is possible, I think. But back into hallucinations, have you ever had a hallucination where something was scary or chasing you?
Okay. I'm not going to say I've had a hallucination where anything was like scary. My hallucinations are not like horror movies.
Yeah.
I mean, we definitely have some friends, and I'm sure you have some clients who will describe some challenging or difficult macro journeys that they've had, where something caused them to feel concerned in the journey, or they were working through something hard that is actually occurring in real life, but they're working on it through this journey work. and the hallucinations seem scary, but it's not like, I've never had like zombies or monsters or even like ghosts. If somebody, say there was like a human type entity, like my grandmother or something, to come through in a journey, if that were to happen, it doesn't feel like the type of fear that you have when you think you've seen a ghost in real life.
Yeah.
For instance,
Right.
like for me, it doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, that's definitely true. There are a lot of different instances where a hallucination has different potentials. So people that have the hardest experiences actually go into recalling their trauma. So for folks that do have past traumas, it could even be past life traumas. I mean,
Yeah.
You never know what could show up. But there's sometimes people will have a past recall of trauma that has happened. So this is this space where if you have the proper guidance and a good setup, like psychological safety within yourself to know that I'm going through this experience, right? Because you don't forget you're on mushrooms. You're like, okay, I know I'm on mushrooms. This is happening. How do I process it? And this is where actually some of those experiences that are the hardest are the most profound and life-changing.
Mm-hmm.
So when people say, I don't want to see anything bad, it's like, yeah, I get it. We don't want to feel re-traumatized.
Yeah.
And that is rarely the case. Most often things come up so you can look at it from a different perspective, and you're actually given a different perspective through the mushroom experience, where you're not even sometimes in control, where you all of a sudden start thinking, wow, I can see this from both sides, and I've never seen it that way. So that's the thing that most people will get scared about, is having just a really bad trip. And a lot of time it does come as memory recall. In other spaces, it can come as, and I've had this experience, it was kind of bad, and this was before I was using mushrooms as more medicinal, so I didn't have the guidance, it was more recreational, and I definitely had a bad trip. And I would say it would be a bad trip, and it was challenging because I didn't actually have anybody to help me figure it out. Although that trip also changed the course of my life, because in that trip I saw my friend, I looked over at my friend and she started to look a little bit demonic. She looked like a weird demon fairy. And then the environment looked really spooky and scary, and things looked very scary, basically. And I sat for the entire trip, probably about 4 to 6 hours, huddled in a small ball looking at a flower the whole time, just thinking, okay, when I'm done with these mushrooms, I am going back to Hawaii. I'm going to get healthy. And I was serious, and it happened where afterwards I had realized that I was actually just in a very dirty, unsafe environment. I had put myself in environments that weren't actually supportive. And as soon as I got done and the mushrooms had dissipated, I wanted to go eat healthy foods. I wanted to get hydrated. I wanted to go find people that were in a healthier place. Whereas the people I was hanging out with, we were just not doing the very good things. And so it really showed in that journey. But that's why it was life-changing, because it showed me the things that I don't want anymore. And it made it really obvious that this is not for me. So I think hallucinations can come in ways that can be supportive for what you want. Because a lot of times we're just making excuses for things and hiding things from ourselves, and mushrooms make things very apparent and can amplify some of those situations.
You know what I think is really interesting, actually? So our friend, his dad went for the very first time to a mushroom like retreat center, and they were very clinical and kind of science-based about the journey. And they were actually like paying almost no mind to the hallucinations.
Yeah. Yeah. They framed it as, you're going to have hallucinations, and that's okay. what's going to happen is your whole system's going to get rewired and reset. So don't worry about the hallucinations. They'll probably happen, but don't worry about them. So he was having an experience and like, okay, well, I know I'm hallucinating. And there was just a bucket of don't worry about that he tried to put it in. And that wasn't actually really supportive overall. But
so the thing that's interesting to me about this
yeah,
experience is that the hallucinations, and this is kind of referencing what we were talking about in the beginning of the video, the hallucinations don't necessarily affect you in the way that you were healing or re-experiencing something or what have you. It doesn't have to affect you at all. So if your fear is that you're going to see something scary or hallucinate something bad, it will only last as long as the hallucination is lasting, unless you decide that you want to integrate, which everybody should integrate both macro and micro journeys, I would say. And micro journeys meaning like microdosing over a long period of time, because it's the integration work that you do with everything that you experienced, with what you felt, the sensations in your body, the hallucinations, or whatever, that can create that change for you in your life, right?
And integration is just taking the experience and digesting it in a way to decide and figure out how this best helps you in your life. Mm-hmm. So me having a bad trip helped me because I was able to see that this isn't what I want for myself. I want something different. And then I was able to make those changes. In that case, it is true for the science of it in this particular instance. He was going to this facility, this retreat. Some people were stopping their cluster headaches. So It was very much a physical reset for the body, which can happen as well. So they were accomplishing a different goal, a different intention. And they had people there to help if you did have really bad hallucinations, but that wasn't the focus. It wasn't therapy through your hallucination, which kind of can happen as well. I saw this other video recently, and I wish I had the guy's name in my head right now, but he was saying, what happens if you see, it was on a reel, what happens if you see a demon on hallucinations? And he had just the best response. And it was that a lot of these things that we see, or that is our hallucinations, they're normally talking to us, first of all, in our language, because our mind is creating symbols that are translating whatever is happening in our experience. So, for example, he was saying that it's actually just consciousness showing itself to us in different symbols. And the symbols are things that we create. Like I think in the Netflix series, there was a woman who saw Mary, Jesus' mother. She was Catholic. And so Mary showed herself to her, and it was very spiritual for her. I probably wouldn't see Mary because I don't remember or recall that her as a symbol in my life as having deep meaning. So I might have had a similar experience as her, but might have seen a different symbol, because it's all about how your mind is translating whatever needs to show itself. So he was saying if you did happen to see a demon or something of that nature, that you really just be curious about it. Because like, oh, I wonder why. Like, why is this showing itself to me? Why am I having this symbol? What is it there for? And he said, it might get a little worse before it gets better, not always, but then it will change and it will transform. If you're able to stick with it and just like breathe and really be curious about why is this here, then it will transform, or you will transform, but it will not stay the same. And I always have a belief for myself that I am a sovereign being, and these things can't hurt me, because I'm actually in medicine with a sacred plant. And because I take it that way, it kind of creates a belief for myself that I'm not going to be possessed or anything. That I have not heard of any instances where that was the case. So now with people that have schizophrenia or have schizophrenic genes in their family line, they're normally the people that are suggested not to do mushrooms because of this factor. In indigenous cultures, there's a whole different belief system around schizophrenia, but without those kinds of guides and spiritual support, it's not actually a good idea, because it can turn on channel for those people. So just as a cautionary tale, that is the one place where mushrooms are kind of a no-fly zone.
To get like scientific nerdy, what is happening in the brain when we're actually hallucinating? Do you know?
Well, when we're doing mushrooms, the psilocybin is activating a global neurological network. So there's pictures online, and I have a couple of images on my website where they do the brain scans and they show the regular activity, and then they show activity on mushrooms is wild. So because of this, all of our senses and just so many things are firing at once. So all of our senses happen to also take in a lot of information. So when you're seeing things, colors will look very vibrant and beautiful and sparkly, and you can have sensitivity to light because it's just too much. Smell, hearing, you can have sound sensitivities, and it's because all of your nerves and all of your senses are open and bringing in so much information, it's almost too much to process. So that's why some mushroom experiences might be more physical, some might be more hallucinations or more visions and visuals. Some might be very philosophical, but no visuals at all, right? There's just all these different things because you can only process so much information. And so I think because of this extra activity, who knows what the experience could be? It's an infinite amount of potential. So
yeah, okay. You know what I'm going to say to start wrapping up our conversation, because I'm somebody who likes the hallucinations, I actually feel disappointed when the mushrooms don't seem to be activating like that part of my brain. And like you said, different mushrooms activate different things within us, and different amounts of mushrooms too have an effect. So I guess what I'm going to say is, if you're somebody who's afraid of hallucinating, don't let yourself experience it and get more curious about it. And what would you say?
Yeah, I would say this is a part where it's always good to have support. I mean, don't go into this on your own and just have all this fear. I mean, talking to somebody that can break it down in a way that makes sense helps you to have some psychological safety around, okay, I am now prepared that whatever shows up, I'm just going to breathe through it and witness and take care of myself while I'm in this process, and the mushrooms will dissipate and it will stop if it is something really uncomfortable. So knowing that sometimes creates safety for people. We're like, okay, this isn't forever. It's just for this amount of time. I can handle whatever comes at me for that amount of time. So that's a lot of the prep work that I think is really important, is just to make sure you're taking care of yourself and that you have support, and tools, internal tools. Like for me, deep breathing is really helpful. Moving your body, making sure your body's comfortable. There's just different tools that you can do to support yourself, just as though you're having a dream while you're awake.
Yeah. Again, this is not medical advice. We're just people who really love mushrooms and who facilitate the safe use of micro and macro dosing in your personal and spiritual wellness journey.
Yeah, and we're just here to normalize the conversation. We can talk about this, and it's okay.
Education is legal.
Yeah, and it's okay to just be curious and explore, and that's part of what this is about. So you don't have to experience it if you don't want to. We will, and tell you all about it.
I'm Jen.
And I'm Amber, and I help to facilitate and support and integrate people that use psychedelics, primarily psilocybin mushrooms. And there's more videos to come. So if you're curious and you still have questions, you're welcome to ask questions in the comment or email mindfulrabbit.space.
And we'll see you next time.